Hey guys, hello. Thank you so much for being here. I see you guys all in the chat talking about snow, well, it's actually raining here right now. I don't even know if you can hear it outside. But thank you so much for being here today. My name is Felicia from SweetGeorgia. This is the live office hours of the School of SweetGeorgia, and we come here every month, the last Thursday of every month, to talk about questions and things that you guys have talked about inside the School of SweetGeorgia. Today is actually Thanksgiving in the US. And so when we plan these live office hours days, we kind of like don't really notice anything else on the schedule. I just make them the last Friday of every month. But today is Thanksgiving in the US. And so I just want to wish happy Thanksgiving to anybody who is actually watching on their holiday. It's so nice. So I have so many things to talk about today. Let's talk about fiber and things. Thanks for being here, everybody. So this is what we have going on today. We're going to talk a little bit about the new and upcoming content. We're going to talk about community events. And I want to let you know that in lieu of doing this live office hours next month, instead of doing like an office hours, what we're going to do is we're going to do a holiday get together, like a meetup with everybody in the school. And I'll talk about that in a minute as well. But that is something that is different and special for this year. I'll talk a little bit about the weaving study group, about my spinning study group results as well, some questions and answers that you guys have been having, and sharing some of your work, because it has been amazing, and I cannot wait to share with you guys all of the things that have been showing up inside the school. So let's go ahead with that. Now, before I go on with the next part of the slides, which is about the upcoming content, I do want to let you know that what we're doing right now is we're doing like this little thing. We're going to hope to encourage you to bring a friend to the school. So right now, with all of the Black Friday specials and everything that's going on, we decided to do something a little bit different. And that is basically to help bring in friends and then do your fiber learning with your friends. So there's a coupon code HOLIDAY 2021, and that will get you 15% off the first year for an annual or a quarterly membership, or the first cycle of a quarterly membership for either yourself or a friend. So yeah. This is I feel like it would be a nice gift to give to somebody to sort of learn weaving together in the new year or something like that. So that is that. And then let's talk about what we're doing inside the school. So I have shown this sort of list before, and we've added a couple more things to it. This is basically what we have released just recently in the school. And it is also all of the things that are going to be coming out for the first quarter of 2022. So January, February, March. There's 2 releases in each month for the first quarter. It goes like that pretty much through the whole year. But we just recently released the Weaving Twills class, which I know some of you guys have already watched and finished and woven projects for. So that is fantastic and amazing to see all of that happening. And the crochet class just came out last Wednesday, and already there's a project that's done, which is amazing. Charlotte was quite amazed. She's like, oh, it's so fast. And what we recently just released is the needle felting class. And so you can see these beautiful felted ornaments were made by Charlotte, and they're 100% wool. They're all needle felted into these perfect spherical balls. And she's made a whole bunch of these and made a course teaching you how to also make them if you were interested. But just yesterday, the girls were decorating the studio here with the Christmas tree and hanging the ornaments and making acorn curtains and garlands out of crochet chains. Like, it's quite decorated here. I should post some pictures and things. But yes, that is the needle felted ornaments class. And then you guys will know that in January, we have 2 weaving classes coming. One of them is the Intentional Weaver with Laura Fry, who is a master weaver here in Canada. So she typically teaches for the Olds Master Weaver program, and she's come to teach her Intentional Weaver class. And we also have here, there's a photo of Amanda Wood weaving at the Rigid Heddle loom. And so she's doing a color and weave study on Rigid Heddle. And Meridy's saying, yes, Charlotte is so talented. Yes, Charlotte is so talented. She really, really is. In February, we're doing wet finishing again with Laura. And then we have a course that Matt Akers, who is one of our designer in residence. We started a designer in residence program last year to sort of launch new knitwear designers and help new knitwear designers. And so Matt and Ruth are both part of that program here at SweetGeorgia. And so he's put out a little workshop about fixing brioche mistakes. It's not about knitting brioche, but it's about what do you do if you do come across a mistake in brioche and how do you go about fixing that. Ruth is doing one about wrap and turns and about like different ways of doing wrap and turns for knitting. And Tabitha has a shawl class that's coming out. Design your first triangle shawl. I think that we've knit a few triangle shawls in the past here, but the idea where you start from the center back of your neck and then you start to build out in a triangle format, it was like one of the very first formats of shawls that I ever learned how to knit. And you could just knit the entire thing in stockinette and it makes a really lovely shape. But Tabitha is going to teach you how to add lace patterning on top of that, how to build that out and make your own design. And so that is kind of going to be part of a knitting study group that's happening in the spring. So I'm not going to mention it too much yet because it's not it's not imminent, but I do want to let you know that it is coming. The idea of the knitting study group in the spring of 2022 is going to be a 2-part study group. So it's going to be 4 weeks of learning how to knit a lace shawl. And then the second half is going to be about learning to design a lace shawl. So if you already know how to knit lace and you want to learn how to design, you can just pop in halfway through the study group. But if you want to do the whole thing, you can start from the beginning. But that is generally the idea of what we have planned for the knitting side of things. So that is all coming in the next 3 months, next quarter. Yes. And so if you want to see what else we have planned as we start to plan them, you can look for the content roadmap. So that is School of Sweet Georgia /roadmap, and all of that information is there. So I do want to show you a couple of photos from these classes because they're so fun. And so here's another one of Charlotte's beautiful ornaments where she's also sewn in beads and sort of embellished a lot of these. She's embellished some of these ornaments here, and so that is looking really, really lovely. I also have a snapshot from her crochet class. And so this crochet class basically takes you from the very beginning. If you've never held a crochet hook before, don't know what kind of crochet hook to get, she leads you through all of the different materials. So we talk about bamboo ones, we talk about metal ones, we talk about ergonomic ones that have like a squishy center to hold on to, talk about all sorts of different kinds of crochet hooks. And then also she just goes step by step and teaches you how to tension the yarn, how to hold, where to apply tension to your work as you're making loops and crocheting. Because I think that is one of the most important things, is just trying to figure out how much tension to apply to everything as you're working and how to coordinate everything. She also teaches you how to hold your crochet hook very ergonomically so that you don't injure yourself. Unlike me, I learned how to crochet when I was in elementary school, and I learned to hold it like this and I work like this, and it causes my body so much stress and so much strain. So that's not a great thing to do. So follow what Charlotte is doing with crochet. She started crochet when she was in grade 9 and has not stopped. And so she goes into great detail about all of these things. So if you've ever wanted to learn, this is the time to learn. I also have a snapshot from Amanda's class for Color and Weave on rigid Heddle. I know we've been talking a lot about weaving, but I talk more specifically about multi-shaft weaving or 4-shaft weaving or 8-shaft weaving, all the other things that you can do, because those are the kinds of looms that I have around me very often. But Amanda is doing course by course by course, going in depth into rigid Heddle weaving. And so we first did the clasped warp and weft earlier this fall, where she used a technique that is quite distinct to rigid Heddle looms. Doing the clasped warp technique is not really possible with a 4-shaft loom without a ton of work. It's much easier on a rigid Heddle loom. And so there's some things that rigid Heddle is really wonderful for. And so that is one of them. And this is sort of also an an exploration of what you can do with just 2 colors on a rigid Heddle loom. An amazing amount of patterns can be made just with 2 colors, plain weave on a rigid Heddle loom. And so that's what that course is all about. We are going to do, again, like a study group in the summertime, focusing on rigid Heddle weaving as opposed to multi-shaft weaving. We'll do the multi-shaft one in January. Yes, color and weave. So cool. Like all of the things that you can make. I have another photo here of, so this yarn, just in case you're wondering, this is Duet, which is made by Gist. So it's a linen and cotton blend. You can see there's kind of like a 2-tone effect to all this. But yeah, I have another photo here. This is Amanda weaving on the Ashford. That's a 16-inch sample it rigid Heddle loom, and she's using the Gist Beam, which is the 3-2 cotton yarn that we have used also for the twill class. Yeah, and so this is a color and weave project. Amanda quite likes yellow, so we have a bunch of projects that have been done in yellow. And so the interesting thing about this is that color and weave, very often we think high contrast and things like that. And so this is kind of like an experiment in figuring out how much contrast is enough contrast in order for design to show up. And so this is something that is fun to explore as well. So that is it for new classes that are coming up in the future. And of course, if you guys ever have any suggestions or ideas about things that you would like to see courses about, you feel free to email me. Absolutely feel free to email me. So talking about community events, these are the times in the calendar when we all get together, and we can get together on Zoom. These meetups are hosted by our moderators and people from our School of SweetGeorgia team. And so you can see in December, we have quite a number of meetups. We were just talking about them yesterday. It looks like we have 10 meetups, just like get together, bring your crafting, those kinds of meetups, 10 of these meetups in December, plus 1 new member orientation day that is happening. So I'm going to do a quick rundown of how they typically go. But typically on Tuesdays, you'll have a meetup with Robin, one of our moderators, and that happens at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's the first and third Tuesday of every month. This coming month in December, because Robin mentioned that there was people who were going to be off on holidays and would like to get together and meet again. And so we added an additional meetup time on December 28th. So if you want to participate in any of these meetups, you just bring whatever you happen to be working on, whether it's knitting or spinning or weaving or whatever you want to bring, crochet, needle felting, anything you want to bring, you can bring to these. On Thursdays, there's a knit night, which is in the evenings here in Vancouver time, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The second and fourth Thursday of every month, we have a meetup with Charlotte. And so that happens at the studio and also on Zoom. And so if you're new to that time slot, you can feel free to come a few minutes early and introduce yourself to Charlotte and get to know the host before you meet the big group and everything like that. So that's the Thursday knit night. And yes, Robin is saying, come and show off what you are working on or what you were gifted or gave yourself. Wednesdays, there's new meeting times. And so these are different time slots. So there's a Wake and Make, which is early morning in sort of, it's hosted by Vicky. So she is in Manitoba. And so at her time, it's quite early. And then there's on the 29th, there's one called Making Until Midnight. And so in Manitoba time, that goes to Vicky's midnight. But the idea is that we want to be able to reach all the different members in all the different time zones. And so you can look around and see which time zone would be more convenient for you. And Saturdays, we're doing the spinning and weaving meetups. Those are 12 p.m. That's 12 noon on Saturdays, spinning and weaving. But of course, you can bring your knitting, bring whatever you want. These are just suggestions for what you might want to bring. That is it. And then the last thing that we have just added on is, in lieu of doing a live office hours for next month, we want to do this holiday crafternoon. So basically the idea is that we're going to do December 16th, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will be there to hang out and chat with my knitting project or something. And I think Greta's going to be there. Vicky, I think, is going to be there. Maybe Robin. I think Robin's going to be there. Maybe Charlotte will be there. Maybe some other people from the studio will be there. But it will be just a nice time for everybody to just get together and relax during the holidays so that it's not so busy and crazy. So yes, Meridy's saying what's great about the meetups is that everyone shares tips and knowledge. It's not only a time to work on a project, but also a chance to learn something new. That is so nice. Fantastic. So that is the calendar. Here is the link to the calendar. It's in the community. So just pop over to community on your menu bar and then go down to events calendar, and all of this will pop up and it shows you the times of all of these meetups. Now, the cool thing about the calendar is it will show you the time in your local time zone. So you don't have to do a lot of the conversion. Whatever time it says for you should be the time that it's actually happening for you. Fantastic. So let's get into stuff that we're learning now. So this is the thing that is coming next. The next study group is the weaving study group. And the weaving study group is specifically about weaving a twill gamp on 4 shafts. So you need a 4-shaft loom in order to get started with it. And so if you are brand new to weaving or you've just acquired a 4-shaft loom, then I encourage you to first check out, there's 2 classes on the School of SweetGeorgia already. One is called Essential Weaving and the other one is Multi-Shaft Weaving Basics. And both of those courses have content that would be a great sort of foundation for getting started with going further with your 4-shaft loom. So we recommend, putting on a really narrow warp, weaving a little bit of sampler, just to get a test and a feel for the loom before you go off and make the twill gamp. But the twill gamp project is going to start January 6th, 2022. And you can go already to that page. It's right here, School of SweetGeorgia /courses, weaving study group, twills on 4 shafts. So if you go to the menu bar, you'll also see under community study groups, this is where you'll find it. And week by week, it's already sort of roughly scheduled out. And this is basically what we're going to do for the 8 weeks. So the first 4 weeks is weaving the twill gamp. And then the last 4 weeks is looking at taking information out of that twill gamp and then extrapolating that and making that into a larger project. Either you make a pillow or like a pillowcase, or you can make a scarf, or you can make a blanket, whichever one you like. Now, the discussion forum is already up as well. So you can join that. And so you can find that in communities and then groups. You'll find the study group for this as well. And so this is where you can create your own thread and then post what you've been learning week by week. Meridy's asking, does this mean that we'll start warping on January 6th or should we already be warped? No, week 2 is when we actually go about winding the warps and yeah, you'll need a warping board for that. So winding the warps with a warping board and then dressing your loom. So theoretically, that should take a week to do. But with all of these study groups, there's no such thing as being behind. You can just do the work as you can. And this is just a guideline for how we break out the content. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be able to keep up with it week to week to week. There's no homework, there's no due dates or anything. And the study groups continue. They just persist inside the school. So even the spinning study group stuff, you can still go back and reference. The natural dye study group, you can still go back and reference. Week 1, planning and drafting. This is really about like looking at your yarn that you're going to use. How do you calculate a set for that? We're going to look at the draft. How do you create these weaving drafts? You can use mine or you can work on your own. And so part of that is I want to do some tutorials showing you how I use the weaving draft software. So I have Fiberworks for my computer, and I also have iWeave-It on my iPad. And so that's a really cool one because then in the evenings I can just sit on the iPad and kind of tap, tap, tap and create these little drafts and test out weaving ideas on that before I go to actually make a project. So we'll talk about all that during week 1. Week 2 is when we actually wind warps and do all of that kind of stuff. Now, if you're wondering about what yarn we're using, The yarn that we used in the Twill Gamp project is Gist Beam. It's a 3-2 cotton. It's kind of like a heavier weight cotton. And if you don't have access to 3-2, there's also 4-8 or 8-4 cotton is also very similar weight. And so you could use that. So I hope that helps answer the questions there. Now, wanted to mention about looms, because last month we were talking about how, well, if you don't have a 4-shaft loom, where can you get a 4-shaft loom? And at the time I had a girlfriend who was looking on some of the marketplaces. She was kind of looking for a 4-shaft table loom, ended up going down the rabbit hole and buying a 4-shaft floor loom. And so as she was sending me listings saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I discovered some listings as well that I was really interested in. And I ended up picking up a Leclerc Fanny counterbalance loom. It's made in 1968. And the reason why I wanted this was, I don't know if you guys have ever seen before, but in this space in my dining room, by the window here, the baby wolf loom used to sit in this corner of my house. But then when Laura Fry came to teach at the studio, I took the baby wolf and I brought it to the studio. So at home, I had no loom. And so I really wanted a loom to fit in that space. And because I love the Leclerc Mira counterbalanced loom so much, I wanted something that was very similar. I wanted a counterbalance loom. And also the fact that I heard that Leclerc used to make these 27-inch wide looms. It was very small, very compact, very narrow. And so I ended up going down this rabbit hole and finding a loom that was out in Ottawa, which is pretty much like almost across the country from us. And I was extremely lucky that the seller was very reliable, very responsive, really super good with email communication back and forth. And he was excellent to work with. And so we managed to have this loom disassembled in Ottawa and then shipped over by truck. And then it arrived here in Vancouver. And then I was able to actually assemble it myself in maybe like an hour and a half in an evening, because it is exactly the same as the Leclerc Mira. And so like I recognized all the parts and everything came together perfectly fine and all of this kind of stuff. And so you can see that the seller was fantastic. He had labeled all of the parts with numbers to show which pieces fit together. I think he has some experience with breaking down these looms and packaging them and shipping them in this way, because that was fantastic. We had talked last month about like buying these looms on marketplaces and things like that. And in the past, I have always purchased looms new. So I had never really gone through the emotional experience of handing over like funds to somebody that you'd never met before at a distance, and being able to trust this entire transaction and that entire process. It was a little bit more nerve-wracking than I thought it was going to be. But at the same time, I feel like I was extremely lucky to have stumbled upon this particular seller who was really, really good to work with. So it's obviously pouring rain outside in Vancouver now, and it'll probably rain until the end of May. And so what I'm hoping is that in the summertime, I'm actually going to disassemble the whole thing again and take it outside and refinish all of the pieces, so that way they can be a little bit refurbished. Right now, I mean, I just assembled it to get it back together to see that it's working. But it is from 1968 and it needs a little bit of help. So I'll show you kind of like a little bit more close up here. But like it came with 2 reeds, but the reeds were completely rusted. So I don't know. I've seen people refurbish rusted reeds by scraping them with steel wool and navel jelly and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm not entirely sure whether or not I should keep those reeds at all. You can see the Lee sticks that were supplied. They have a little bit of tape residue, like the sticky residue from tape. So all of that stuff I'd want to sand off and then refinish the Lee sticks. That should be pretty easy. As I was assembling the shafts and hanging them, they were quite squeaky. So I was trying to figure out, how do you make these not squeaky? Where do I lubricate these? And so that requires a little bit of work. And then also to balance them, so that way, right now, sometimes when I step on the treadles, the shafts move from side to side like this, which is very strange. And I wonder if it will be different if it actually has a warp on it. So I'm putting the warp on right now to see how that's all working. And then finally, these cloth beams and the warp beams, you can see really, really tiny, but there are cracks that are happening in this big, huge chunk of wood. Yeah, and so that needs a little bit of TLC. So this is all to say that, yes, you can find old looms on marketplaces and sort of bring them back to life. There's a lot of looms out there. Really, there's a ton of looms out there. And Rachel, who just popped on, we had talked before about like, it would be so nice to just drive across Canada with a truck and just rescue these looms that people are trying to get rid of, because in some cases they're massive, beautiful looms that that people just don't have space for. Yeah. Oh, try scraping instead of sanding, less dust. Yes, I should do that. Yes, Mary D, you had that question about washing the cloth on your front beam, and I have that as a question that's coming up. So we will talk about that. But basically the idea is that, yes, these cloth aprons that are on the front and the back of the loom, from what I have read, when people take them off and wash them, they actually shrink, and then they're no longer the same size. So if they're really, really super dirty, I think that the advice has been that you should probably replace the cloth altogether, or like sew a new one or make a new one or something like that. But if you do take that off and wash it, it's likely that it will shrink in size, and maybe it's not going to be the full width of what you need it to be for the beams. I hope that answers you. So talking more about weaving with these 4-shaft looms and things like that. This twill gamp, I've already woven 4 times. I'm currently weaving twill gamp number 5, and this is on the Mira loom right now. It's in a merino lamb's wool yarn. That's a much, much finer scale. I was trying to work at a finer gauge, and so this one is set at 20 ends per inch. And so you can see this coming together. This yarn is also a little bit tricky to work with. It feels a little bit like Velcro, and so as you're threading, all of the threads kind of stick to each other a little bit. They don't tangle, they just kind of grip each other because it's wool. And so now I'm going to weave a 6th version of this gamp in another yarn, in a bamboo yarn, and that's going to be set at 18 ends per inch. And all of this is really to build a bit of a library around what do all these fibers feel like when they're woven. The merino is 17.2. So that's very good eye, Amanda. You can just look at that and say, oh, that's that size. Yeah, but it's 17.2 merino. And yes, so previously we wove this gamp with beam and also BFL and silk fine. So yeah, just building a library of all of these different yarns and how they work, because they all feel different as you're winding them, as you're threading them, and as you are weaving them. And so this is something that we included in the workbook of the Twills class, is really about how the cotton yarn, the just beam cotton itself, it needs a bit of a harder beat. It needs to be more firm. And sometimes I had to beat twice to get it to stay in place. And this is one of the things that we had with the color and weave class with Amanda Wood, is like working with beam, it needs extra heavy beat to get it to stay in place. And that can be tricky depending on which loom you're using. Wool doesn't need that kind of a firm beat. If you beat it too much, you'll overbeat it, and then the picks will be too close together. So I feel like wool just needs to be kind of pressed into place, just tucked into the shed. And so getting a feel for how each different fiber reacts and how you have to adjust your body and your body movements in order to accommodate these different fibers, I think is it's a really good experience for your body. You have to become really flexible to work with all of these different kinds of yarns. What are the characteristics of bamboo yarn? It is not stretchy. It's a bast fiber, so it's like a cellulose fiber. It's more like, it's strong and it's shiny. This yarn that I'm using, I'll have to show you guys photos in January, but it's shiny, it's silky, it's super drapey. It's just like, it feels like silk pajamas was what it feels like. It's just sloopy and drapey and slick, and it will be really interesting to see what kind of a cloth gets made with it. It's going to be really, really silky and drapey. I feel like it would be a great thing for scarves, like yeah, very fine gauge scarves. Okay, let's talk about not weaving. Let's talk about spinning now. So these are the 6 skeins of yarn that I spun as part of the spinning study group that happened earlier this fall. So the goal was to spin 6 skeins of 50 grams each of the new colorways that we had made for SweetGeorgia, but to spin them in a way where they were 3-ply yarns, where the colors would all align on themselves again, and then produce these really long color transitions, and to make it a worsted weight yarn so that I could knit the pattern that is the night shift, which is this pattern. Okay, so that is what it's supposed to look like. I am going to show you from here. Okay, so this is the pattern that I'm supposed to be making. And then let me show you. So this is the one that I previously made. This is the cowl. This is called the shift. And so this one is made at a finer gauge. This is a 2-ply yarn. It ended up being closer to like a sport weight. And so that's what's happening here. Now with these ones, these worsted skeins, I have just started knitting it up. And this is what it's starting to look like. So you can see the pattern is extremely easy to memorize. I don't follow the instructions anymore. I just knit it because I know what I'm looking for. But basically the idea is that you increase along this edge of your shawl, and then you're doing this mosaic sort of slip stitch pattern with just 1 stitch for 5 for 5. So there's like 5 rows where you see 1 dot stitches, and then 5 rows where you see 2 stitches making bigger dots. Okay, so it's almost like this sort of pointillist exercise, right? So you're seeing all of these dots on backgrounds. And so I think the biggest challenge here is figuring out which colors to use for background, which colors to use for dots, how do the colors align. And so I am using, because the pattern is kind of using 1 color throughout for probably about 5 sections, all using the same color in the background, I decided to use this one in the background. And so this is sort of the purple color that is going to progress into blue, that's going to go back into purple. And so this is the background. And on top of the background, I have been laying on like the gold from this one, and then the green from this one. And so it's just trying to figure out, well, what's the next color section? I think the next color section might be this one. And so the next one will have dots of this color. I can break the colors and just switch entirely, but then it looks a little bit jarring. So yes, this is the most challenging part of working on this pattern. It's not the actual knitting of the stitches. It's figuring out which colors should I put with which, and what is it all going to look like at the end of the day, and not knowing what colors are going to come out of your skein next, and trying to plan ahead, all of this stuff. I'd be curious if anybody has knit this, if you guys have any suggestions on how you go about doing this, because this has been a very popular pattern. Many people have knit this, but I don't know how many people have knit it with hand spun, and I'd just be really interested to see what people are doing in terms of the planning of all of this. But yeah, the other thing is that you can see that this is sport weight, so it's much finer gauge. The pattern shows up at a finer gauge. The cloth is a lot drapier. I like this one a lot, and this one is significantly more coarse feeling. And maybe I should have gone up a needle size, but I feel like it's okay. I think once it gets all washed out, it'll be fine. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So Rachel, you're knitting the shift pullover, same sort of slip stitch pattern, right? But in a sweater. Okay, so now that's enough of my stuff. Let's talk about your stuff. So we have questions from you guys. So there was a couple of questions, and one of them was Meridy's question about cleaning the cloth apron and what we should do about that. But yes, if you do take it off and wash it, it could shrink. Let's talk about cleaning the Drumcarter. So this is a picture of my Drumcarter with stuff that's been in it. Obviously, I would take this bat off, but when you take the bat off of the Drumcarter, very often you'll find that there's like little streaks of fiber that are still in the drum carding cloth that you're trying to pick out, and it's very, very difficult to pick out. And so I think Randy had said that she's been trying to use a hand carder, a dog brush, a hairbrush, knitting needles, trying to get the fiber out of her Drumcarter. And so I wanted to show you, because I tried to explain to her, but I think it's easier if I just actually show you photos of what I have. So my Drumcarter came with these different tools. Okay, so this is like a flicker. So you would use this, and then you can just basically open the tips of your locks, of your fiber tips with something like this. You can see sort of the angle of how all those tines are. I'm just trying to, there you go. You can see the angle of the tines, and so that helps to flick open the tips. You could use this to clean your Drumcarter. This one is a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit more agile. Again, you can use this to flick open the tips of your fiber, but yeah, it can also be used to pull stuff out of your drum carding cloth. But you can see some of these pins are actually damaged. They've been bent a little bit. Because it's small, it can get in there and kind of dig out the stuff from your Drumcarter. But 100%, this is my favorite tool for cleaning the drum carding cloth. And the reason for that is because it has the curve to this handle. And so I basically go like this. I don't know. If this is your Drumcarter, I would roll it like this, and it just helps to lift all of the stuff out of the drum carding cloth. And it works amazingly well. I just don't know where you can get something like this, but if you don't have something like this, then this would work really well too. And this is a little bit more manual. You kind of have to go in and pick everything out a little bit more, but this one is amazing. And so that pulls everything out just because of the curve. So these ones, when I bought my Drumcarter, it was from Patrick Green. Patrick Green Drumcarters, I believe, have been sold to Brother Drumcarter in the US. So if you need to find them, I think it's Brother. And the next question I have was also from Meredy, who's asking about, I don't have a rattle. What is its function, and do I need to get one? And so I thought it would be better explained with more photos. And so here are two things that happened in the conversation. And this conversation was happening on the multi-shaft weaving thread that's in the community forums. And so there's a whole thread. Actually, Meredy, Amanda, you guys were already talking about doing this pre-slaying idea, having read it somewhere before or seen a video about it on another website or something like that. But this is a technique that Laura is actually demonstrating for us in the course that's coming out in January. So you'll see how she does it. It's amazing. It's changed my life. I'm doing it all the time now, except for when I'm not. So this, on the left-hand side, this is a photograph of a rattle. So this is the shacked rattle. You can see that there are these pins that are 1 inch apart from each other. And it's basically all it is. It's just a stick of wood with pins in it. And it just so happens that I got the shacked one because it comes with a little cover. You just cover the top of the pins so that way nobody can get stabbed or hurt or anything like that. In the past, when I didn't have this and didn't purchase anything, I just took a leftover piece of wood and then nailed in finishing nails every inch or so, or every half inch if you can, to make it a little bit finer grain. But this is 1 inch spaces, but you can see where it's not particularly precise. And so I'm using 8-2 cotton here. The 8-2 cotton is kind of fine, and I'm trying to put 20 ends in 1 inch space, and this is how it looks. It doesn't look beautifully spread out. It doesn't look evenly spread out. It's clumpy. And so when you wind this onto your back beam, there's that clumpiness always. And it doesn't wind as well and make a smoother warp beam. And so I think that this pre-slaying method, the rough slaying method, is fantastic because it works better for finer yarns because it gives you much better control over how the yarns are spread out across the back of the loom. And so here, in this case, we were using just beam, and we were going to set it at 12 ends per inch. And so in this case, we're using a 6 dent reed. We put 2 ends in every other slot. So that spreads them out, and it will eventually be 12 ends per inch. But right now, it's just 2 ends in a 6 dent reed every other slot. And so, so by doing that and then beaming the warp on, you've spread out your warp ends 2 at a time, and it's just much more consistent, much more even. This clumpiness, ideally, try to avoid. I feel like this would be okay if you were working at something like 10 ends per inch and you were using thicker yarn. But going at 20 ends per inch, I wish that I had maybe additional pins to put every half inch, just to make sure that there's just the warp ends are spread out more evenly. So I hope that's a good visual explanation for what happens. Robin said, I made my first and only rattle too. I used the top of the reed holder to keep the threads in place while working. Yes, yes. So that is what Leclerc makes. They make a rattle that fits into the slot where you would normally put your reed. And so you can put the top of the where the top bar that holds down the reed, you can put that in place. So that basically will keep it all in place. Yeah. When I got my Louette spring, it comes with a built-in rattle at the top of the castle. And I always thought that was so strange to put it there, but then it does make a lot of sense and it works really, really well. However, the rattle that's on the top of that loom is quite fine, and it's also in metric. So sometimes I have to do too many conversions, and sometimes it's just easier to work in inches because so much of our ends per inch is done in inches. Finally, I want to direct you guys to all of these amazing threads that are happening. So here is that thread about rattle versus pre-slaying the reed. That is happening here. Greta started a conversation about what are you making for the holidays? Are you making gifts for anybody for the holidays? I always start way too late. I have all these plans for all the things that I'm going to make for people. And then, you know, it gets down to the beginning of December and I'm still thinking about it. So that's not great. This conversation is about works in progress. And what do you do when a current project is not sort of inspiring you anymore? What do you do? Can you frog it? Can you frog entire sweaters? What do you do with your works in progress? There's another conversation here about how to store raw fleeces. And I should mention, I did not make a photo of it or anything like that. But earlier, when we went to the fleece auction, Greta and I and Kathy, we went to the fleece auction and we bought 3 fleeces. This coming weekend, we are actually going to learn how to wash those fleeces with Kim McKenna, and using the knowledge that we gain from these weekends of washing the fleece, that's all going to go into the course content that we're making next year about learning how to work from fleece. And so Greta, I have a snapshot of her from the other day, separating out the fleeces into bags for all of the people who are going to be working on these fleeces together. It's going to be very, very exciting. And this thread about my new spinning cart is actually photos of people who have DIY'd their own spinning carts. I have a spinning cart that it's just the cart from IKEA with on rollers, and then just roll it around and put my e-spinner on there and everything like that. But there are so many other ways of setting up your e-spinner or setting up your spinning area. And so I encourage you guys to go check out this thread. It's really cool about all the things that you can do to make your spinning really compact and just everything in one place. You know, your ball winder there, your e-spinner there, your bobbin winders, everything all in one place. So you can go check out that thread here. And then this is the conversation that's been happening after Charlotte's crochet class. And so this one is a conversation about, how people are making their yarn overs when they are making their loops for crochet hooks, and different ways that people hold their hooks, different ways that people wind their yarn, all this kind of stuff. So that will be really, really interesting to go into as well. And finally, if you are interested in participating in that Advent make-along, the Advent kits that we had earlier this fall, they have all shipped from the studio. Hopefully everybody who ordered one has one. If you did order one and you want to chat about the make-along process, working day by day, we did start a thread, and that is all happening right now in the community forums as well. Finally, let's talk about things that you have made. So this one I wanted to share with you. This is from Vicky. This thread is called Rose Path, Twill Scarf, and Selvage Help from the Community. So this was a really, really great example because Vicky watched the twill class and then immediately she went and made this scarf. So it's a Rose Path threading and also Rose Path treadling progression. And she listed the yarns that she's used here, Yarn Cafe Creations, and then Baroka Ultra Alpaca, which sounds really warm and very, very soft. But she was saying that she was having trouble with the left selvage of her weaving, and she didn't know what was going on and what was happening, but she thought it was something to do with the fact that she had a lot of heddles on the left side of her loom and how maybe they were kind of like moving around or banging into the selvage and causing problems. And so she put it out there in the community and asking like, what could I do to fix this? And Meredy, who's actually on the call here as well, she made some suggestions on what you can do to tuck those heddles away. And so you can see before and after shots of what happened with Vicky's scarf. Now I'm going to show you what the fix was. And so this is basically using these clips that you use for quilting. I've seen these as binding clips. So basically it's almost like a little clip that holds together the binding of your quilting projects so that you can hand sew them together or hem them or whatever. But these little clips are super, super, super useful, and you use them to just clip your extra heddles to the side so that they don't touch the end of your weaving. And so Vicky found a way to sort of clamp the heddles together this way, and then Meredy has a photo here where she's clamped the clips to the actual bar, to the heddle bar, so that these heddles are not sliding into your work or anything like that. And so it was great to see that a solution for this issue came up in the community, and it helped fix the issue and help produce this beautiful looking selvage and a beautiful looking scarf. So that was really, really lovely to see. Very nice scarf, Vicky. So nice. I also wanted to share this one with you because this also came out of the Twill Gamp class that just came out. So Catherine S., she sort of combined two ideas in one. So previously we'd done a hand woven color episode where we made a color gamp using colors that come from Tough Love Sock, which is a superwash sock yarn. And yeah, we had made these mini skeins in rainbows of colors. And so Catherine used those rainbows of colors with the Tough Love Sock and then wove the twill gamp with it. So she has a twill gamp and a color gamp all in one. Amazing. And so she decided to she said, I ran the twill gamp twice, moving from straight draw to the twill progression 2, and then in reverse, so that both sides of this shawl are identical. But it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, if you go to her thread, so she posted here about it, and she's going to post again about this project when we begin the study group, because it's such an amazing project here. But it was also an understanding and a learning about working with superwash yarn in a weaving project. And so you can see that initially she had set it at 10 ends per inch, and it was too loose, and the yarn and the fabric was not stable. And so when she tried to wind the cloth onto the front beam, all of the yarn slid around and moved out of place. And so then she had to take it all off, reslay it at 12.5, and then do it again. But she was able to create this twill piece. And so I think that there's so much learning that's happening here. Of course, it's like a beautiful, beautiful project at the end of the day. And then she said she had extra yarn, so she tied on a second warp and lashed onto the front rod. And so she's weaving a second project with these sort of rainbow colors. But yeah, there's a significant amount of learning that's happening here that it will be really good to explore more about in January when we start the study group. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Catherine. So, so beautiful. You'll see Catherine's weaving has actually showed up a couple of times in the live office hours. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. Now this is the crochet shawl that I was talking about that happened mere days after Charlotte's class came out. So this is Amanda B, who's also here in the chat today. And she said she finished the shawl, the DK version, on the weekend, and she's been wearing it ever since. So basically what she did is she had an old cardigan, which if you go to the link, you can see the photo of the old cardigan. But she basically took the old cardigan and she frogged the whole thing, and then basically just use the closest hook size rather than go and buy another one. And so she made the shawl using a 4.5 millimeter hook. And this is the After Midnight shawl, crochet shawl pattern that Charlotte designed for holiday and that she goes over in the Crochet Basics class. It's amazing. It's really, really awesome. So basically Charlotte's class goes from the absolute basics of crochet, like learning how to make a chain stitch, to learning how to do single crochet, learning how to do double crochet, and then learning how to do all these other stitch patterns in order to produce a tiny little mini shawl that is a swatch or a sample that you can then learn all the techniques that you need to in order to make the big shawl. And so this is the big shawl. It comes in 2 weights. You can make a DK weight version or you can make a lace weight version, either way, but that is really so beautiful. I'm curious to see if you had any trouble with the stitch pattern or if it was easy to do. I would love to hear, Amanda, if you found any of that challenging, but it looks really challenging. But when Charlotte talks about it, she's like, oh, it's easy. So, yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Amanda. Super, super inspiring. This one is by Isabel. So this is her first raglan sweater. I don't know if she said it was her first sweater, but it's her first raglan sweater. And she designed this herself using some guidance from the Flannery sweater class, the Knit Your First sweater class that Tabitha gave. And so what she did here is this is the Tofino Road Trip colorway that we make at the school at SweetGeorgia. And usually that's available as a mini skein set with like fingering weight yarns, but she wanted to use worsted weight yarns. So she just individually picked the colors to match that colorway. But it's amazing. It's beautiful. So basically she designed the sweater using some of this raglan advice and guidance, but that all of the stripes are perfectly the same, and she managed to divide up the entire length of the sweater into 5 perfectly equal sections is quite amazing. If you do follow that link there, she talks more about what she actually learned from this, about how maybe next time she should knit a baby version of the sweater as a bit of a sample to see if it worked. She also suggested that like next time she would probably knit the sleeves together at the same time. And then she also learned, because she's knitting these stripes with circular needles in the round, there's a bit of a jog where the 2 colors, where each round connects. And so she was saying that she learned a technique for how to minimize that jog. But this is really, really lovely. She said that it took her 9 months. She had to start over a couple of times. She found some of the process a little bit frustrating, but she persevered and she has this beautiful sweater at the end of the day. And so I really, really wanted to share this with everybody because of how persistent Isabel was in getting to this finished object and just working at it rather than saying, and just tossing it in a corner and not doing it, but just working through all of the challenges to eventually produce something beautiful at the end of the day. So it's very, very lovely. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And this one, I believe, is the last project to share today, but this is 2 skeins of hand spun by Amanda C. And so there was conversation in the forums earlier month ago, talking about this Malabrigo Nube fiber, which is a dyed fiber, but I think it's merino. And so it can sometimes feel a little bit compacted. And so you have to kind of like draft it apart, pre-attenuate it a lot, bring more air into it in order so that you can spin it. And so this pink and purple one is that Nube fiber. And so she said half spindle spun, half wheel spun, and then plied on the nano. Lots of lessons there. And then this one is the blue 70/30 merino silk. And she said a friend asked her to spin it for her. And that one felt like my first big girl yarn. And it looks amazing. It looks it just looks really wonderful and consistent and fine. Like there's a lot of consistency that's happening in this skein here. And I think that if you follow going back a couple of months, I'm pretty sure that Amanda just started spinning this past summer. I think she started spinning just in the summer months this year. And you can very much see her progression. She shows her first yarn and then her next yarn, and then she was dyeing some things. And now this is like her latest yarn that she's been able to produce. And it does look very like all grown up. She also mentioned that she started a YouTube podcast where she's talking about yarny things and talking about spindles and her sweaters that she's knitting and everything like that. And so I wanted to sort of direct everybody to go find it, but it's called Manda Made It. And that is the link to her YouTube channel if you want to go and have a peek and subscribe and send her a few comments. I think that would be really, really super, super nice, because she's just been really consistently going back and spinning and learning more and spinning and spinning. And it's so neat to see her progression all of these months. Yes, I was impressed with Amanda's progress. Oh, Amanda's progress. Amanda. There's two Amandas. Yeah. Yeah, it is really neat to see everybody's progress over these past months. Fantastic. Linda, I'm looking forward to the weaving study group in January. Fantastic. I am too. So thank you, Amanda, for sharing that with us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing all of the videos on your channel. And so finally, this is the time for the giveaway. So this month, in celebration of the Crochet Basics class that just came out, Charlotte wanted to donate a skein of merino silk lace that she dyed in indigo. There's also a naturally dyed skein there as well. This is the one that she sprinkle dyed with natural dyes. So these were two skeins of merino silk lace that Charlotte dyed this past summer during our natural dye study group. And so she wanted to donate one of them to whoever is the winner. And you can choose between these two skeins, but whoever is the winner of the giveaway for this month. So you can go to this link here, schoolofsweetgeorgia.com/live-nov2021. And so we'll keep that open until the end of tonight. And yes, it basically is just 3 questions. It's basically, well, actually it's 2 questions. It just asks you, what did you learn in today's session where we chatted? And what are you going to take with you into the future? What are you going to do with this information? How are you going to put it into practice? So I would be excited to hear about everybody's feedback every month after we do these. And that is basically it for today. We're almost like exactly 1 hour, but this is our contact information. You can find us on Instagram, and obviously our email information and everything like that. But that is basically it for today. It's always so nice to see everybody here. So inspiring to see everybody in the chat. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to December. I think it will be really nice for everybody to just get together December 16th. We can all sit in an actual Zoom room together so that we can all see each other, as opposed to just me talking one way and then reading everybody's chat messages. I think it will be nice to see everybody on December 16th. So December 16th, put it in your calendar, 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And the Zoom link is already in the calendar. So go to Community, Calendar, you'll find the Zoom link, you can pop it into your calendar and then join us that day for that event. And you can bring your favorite festive drink. I might bring some apple cider, and I think that would be really nice to do. Thank you everybody for being here, and I will see you guys inside the school. All right, have a wonderful day.